There is a moment in manifestation that people rarely talk about. It's not excitement. It's not visualization. It's not belief finally feeling strong enough. It's the moment where nothing changes for you internally, even when nothing has changed for you externally yet either. That's the moment manifestation becomes inevitable. Most people think inevitability feels dramatic, like certainty surging through the body, like confidence peaking, like a sense of arrival. But inevitability is quieter than that. It feels like finality without emotion. Hope is not inevitability. Hope says, maybe this will work. Hope still checks. Hope still oscillates. Hope still prepares for disappointment. Inevitability doesn't argue. It doesn't motivate itself. It simply settles. The difference isn't emotional intensity. It's that your identity stopped moving. And when your identity finally stops oscillating back and forth, reality will have no variable left to respond to. This is where many people get confused. They assume that if manifestation were inevitable, they would feel happier, calmer, or more confident. But inevitability doesn't always change how you feel. It changes how often you shift. The moment manifestation becomes inevitable is the moment you stop repositioning yourself internally. You're no longer adjusting, no longer redeciding, no longer emotionally leaning toward the future. That's the internal click most people miss. This click is subtle. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as less thinking, less checking, less emotional movement around the desire. You don't celebrate it, you just notice you're no longer waiting. Not because you gave up, but because waiting no longer makes sense. This is the manifesting state reaching stability. Most people expect inevitability to feel active, but it feels passive, not passive in behavior, passive in identity. You're no longer holding the desire up emotionally. You're no longer bracing for delay. You're no longer managing how this might unfold. You simply continue living from the same internal position. That sameness is the signal. This is why reality often seems to speed up after this point. Not because time changes, but because contradiction ends. Reality always responds slowly to unstable identities. When you're hopeful one day, but doubtful the next, certain in the morning, but anxious at night, calm until the moment something triggers you. That instability creates delay. But once identity stabilizes, events begin to cluster together. People show up, conversations align, and timing feels coincidental, not because you pushed, but because nothing inside is resisting the outcome anymore. This is what Wayne Dyer meant by alignment without interference. Here's an important clarification. Inevitability is not indifference. You still care, you still desire, but you're no longer emotionally negotiating with the future. You're no longer preparing yourself for disappointment just in case. You're no longer rehearsing how you'll feel when it happens. Those behaviors disappear because they're no longer needed. You can tell you've crossed into inevitability when a few things quietly stop. You stop rehearsing the future. You stop checking how you feel about the desire. You stop scanning reality for signs or movement. You don't suppress those impulses. They simply don't arise as often. That's how you know the manifesting state has locked in. Neville Goddard pointed to this when he spoke about the Sabbath, not as rest in the physical sense, but rest in identity. The Sabbath is when the inner work is done, not because the outcome appeared, but because the self that questioned it dissolved. At that point, imagination no longer needs reinforcement. Assumption holds itself. This is why manifestation becomes inevitable before it becomes visible. The inner position stops changing first. Then reality catches up. And when it does, it often feels almost underwhelming because internally you already moved on. Manifestation becomes inevitable when your identity stops moving. Not when you feel more, not when you do more, not when you perfect the process, but when you remain the same internally, regardless of what reality is doing. That's the moment reality has no choice but to follow. Subscribe and enter your manifesting state.